Week 3, Part 1. 3.1, Identifying an Argument. You read sample articles in search of context, and you located articles with useful information to ground your understanding of the subject, to inform your audience, and to serve as the foundation for evidence you will offer to support your claim. Now that you have context for your group presentation and position paper, we will start to look for and at claims surrounding our topic. To begin, we will practice identifying and understanding arguments. Understanding argument. When we think of an argument, our public references range from debate teams and the Supreme Court to Twitter feuds and the reality television feuds, or even just the feud. Our personal ideas around arguments might include arguing with a partner, friends, or a parent. Arguments may expand beyond thinking of verbal fights to include more intellectual arguments and other efforts to persuade someone to think, feel, or act in a specific way. Discussions about arguments are part of a larger discussions about persuasion, and discussions about persuasion are about influence. Persuasive writing has the broad goal of persuading a reader and audience. Argumentative writing is more specific in that it aims to make an argument in support of a position, which can be part of a larger campaign aimed at persuasion that includes more than argument and more than writing. For our purposes, we will focus on argumentative writing, but without wholly abandoning our intention to persuade as well. We cannot elevate success in this area because our audience is theoretical. So we can't test whether they have been persuaded or if they act upon their decision. However, we do want to maintain the theoretical goal of presenting evidence in support of our position to a specific audience with the intention of convincing our audience not only to recognize the value of our position, but to agree with our stated position. Broad conversations and concepts of argumentation, persuasion, and negotiation range from Aristotle to Cialdini and Carnegie and Covey, and from getting to yes to overt propaganda and proselytism and influencers on social media. And those are only a few of the ideas and individuals who frame popular conversations and concepts around an argument. An equally broad range exists in academic discussions about arguments. At one end of the spectrum, we encounter classical logic, which presents a formal practice and formula in relation to argument. Arguably, at the other end of the spectrum, contemporary rhetoric has expanded the concept of argument from classical discourses to include broad theories and practices that cannot fit within a singular definition, let alone a concrete formula. But when we zoom out, we see that the spectrum is more of a sphere, an ecology where a cluster of theories and practices intersect and bounce around like a virtual reality game of Pong. Academic theories and practices of argumentation exist across fields and include legal arguments, philosophical arguments, scientific arguments, mathematical arguments, and many others. And while academic conversations and concepts stem from ancient theories and methods of argumentation and build upon Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, we also consider more modern concepts like the Tolman method and Rogerian arguments. Much of the argumentative writing we encounter today remains grounded in the classical argumentative format, which also informs the structure of our group presentation and position papers. Argumentation is interesting and is getting a good bit of public attention right now. So there are a variety of online sources, from YouTubers to university-sponsored resources, that discuss a range of topics related to argumentation and argumentative writing. Stanford University offers Civic Online Reasoning, which includes lessons on determining the credibility of sources, evaluating the evidence, and locating other sources to include in the conversation. The WAC Clearinghouse, sponsored by the Colorado State University Open Press, includes limitless resources on argumentation. As you advance through your coursework at USF, you will read and write arguments across the disciplines. So in addition to intentionally transferring the skills you learn in ENC 1102 and tailoring them to fit the new rhetorical situation and audience, also make use of credible online resources that will help you to expand your understanding on the related concepts. Each discipline, instructor, class, and assignment will have specific meanings and expectations for the terms and concepts related to constructing and deconstructing arguments. Although many definitions and meanings of argument and many approaches to argumentation exist, for our purposes, we will discuss argument as it functions in relation to the rhetorical mode of writing. Discourses include expository, descriptive, narrative, argument. Our goal is to focus on where the practice of writing meets the practice of argument. We can be interested in the theories of rhetoric that exist in philosophy, communication, English, and beyond, but our goal is to learn to read arguments and to write an argument. We will discuss theories and practices that elevate and expand our ability to deconstruct and construct arguments, but our broad goal is to develop a general foundation so that we can read and write across the general education courses and prepare for writing in our disciplines. In Project 2, we will explore the ways that argumentative writing and research move into and across the disciplines and beyond the academy. And once you begin to do the work of your field in your discipline, these foundational skills will allow you to develop the practices required to succeed in advanced university level reading, thinking, and writing. Because there are so many ideas and so much information available at any time, we can always find some evidence to support some claim in support of every possible position within every debate. And the days when there were simple answers to difficult questions are long gone, if they ever existed. In the absence of an oracle, and in a post-truth age where all that was unquestioned has come under scrutiny, we are met with the freedom to develop informed opinions and the responsibility to maintain the intellectual curiosity to seek and engage the rigorous content needed to find strong evidence on multiple perspectives in support of various positions and to wrestle with new questions and claims as they evolve. Debates and questions surround us. Many of these questions and current debates converge online. The internet is new enough that rules and regulations are still emerging, and these questions intersect with questions of corporate and individual rights and responsibilities. The hate debate provides a great example of how these current questions can be considered using a relatively formal approach to debate. In the hate debate, the debaters move to metacriticism and start to argue about the argument. They even border on ad hominem attacks. Such moves can be intentional or tactical, or can be a sign that the debater doesn't understand the topic, isn't prepared, or has moved away from the evidence and into a place of personal opinion or defense. Recognizing that even the rules and regulations of formal debate are debatable and evolve in response to current topics and trends is a valuable lesson that reminds us of considerations related to rhetorical stance, or the rhetorical situation or triangle, and their overlap with the rhetorical appeals. Stated simply, argumentation and arguments cannot be divorced from audience and intention, or in our case, assignment. We will always have developments and disruptions to existing models, so we will always be faced with questions about new concepts. Stakeholders and shareholders will bring a variety of claims and evidence to broad conversations, and we will need to be able to understand the context of the conversations and identify and evaluate the evidence in support of positions. The critical thinking required to analyze arguments and solve problems and the ability to work as a team are the top characteristics employers value most, followed closely by strong written communication skills. Because there is so much information available and so many big questions, many of which require significant amounts of contextual information to understand, it can be easy to feel like you can't catch up or keep up, or that the only option is simply to accept the opinions of others without question, or seek absolute truth as declared by an authoritative voice. But learning to pause and think for yourself and being able to sit in contemplation is a main goal of education. With so much information that frames education as vocational career training and job preparation, we can get lost in the fear of student loans and interest rates and forget about the goal of educating our worldview so that we can spend the rest of our lives feeling confident that we can navigate any intellectual hurdle and maintain our independence and self. In addition to preparing you to succeed in your coursework and your career, learning about persuasion and practicing argumentative writing also prepares us to be on the other end as consumers of culture and content. No one wants to walk through life feeling confused or misled or faking confidence and comprehension. Standing up for yourself and giving yourself time to think through your thoughts without being swept into the mob or onto the bandwagon is the foundation of personal individual power. Knowing how to navigate all kinds of arguments is a requirement for freedom and agency. Defining an argument. The many meanings and uses of the word argument can cause confusion. In academic writing, the thesis, or result of research published in a scholarly article, is often called an argument. The larger debate between multiple perspectives can be called an argument, and a claim used in support of one position within the larger debate can be called an argument. You can support the argument with other arguments, or you can synthesize multiple arguments into an argument, and you can counter an argument with an argument. In effect, any statement, perhaps anything, can be considered an argument. Without adding some language to clarify the parts and pieces, identifying and understanding any kind of argument without getting tangled up in it can be very difficult. But adding too many terms or concepts that are too complex can add to the confusion. Our larger conversations can include all those uses of argument, but for our assignments, we will use specific terms so that we are all on the same page. Our question is part of a larger debate on the topic of higher education funding. The position you and your team take is your answer to the question, which some people will call the side you take in the debate or your overall stance. Claims are statements that bring together evidence in support of a position. A strong claim synthesizes strong pieces of evidence into a statement that is connected to the position with reasoning that can withstand the scrutiny of analysis. Evidence is data used to support a claim and can include quotes, statistics, policies, examples, survey responses, or other relevant information. Ideally, numerous claims, each with multiple points of evidence, will work together to support your position within the larger debate. Because every part of that process can be, and probably will be called an argument, we will use these terms instead of, but ultimately along with, and in addition to the term argument. As a result, we will use the term argument in our readings and discussions. We recognize that we are talking about all of this and more. When we say we are going to look for arguments in our reading, we know that we will be looking for claims and evidence to support our position within the larger debate. Other terms, such as conclusion and premise, are interchangeable, and evidence is not limited to written or spoken language, but even visual and other forms of evidence are grounded in reasoning regardless of design and delivery. But for now, we will work to identify an argument by identifying claims and locating the evidence offered in support of the claim with the goal of using claims and their evidence to support our position. Identifying the claim and the evidence also begins the process of dissecting the argument into a position, claims, evidence, and reasoning. Arguments are often framed around questions. Yes or no questions can help establish clear sides, but most questions worth thinking through at length have far more than two sides. Even seemingly simple questions like, should I buy this car, end up generating factors that develop more options. Yes, but not today. No, but I should buy this model somewhere else. Maybe, but I need more information. Questions framed as yes or no, or either or, often result in considering additional elements and options like both and or neither. But to answer these questions clearly, start with some version of a yes or no in a clear statement defining the position. The specifics of the answer will expand with the research, but the position always needs to answer the question. Argumentative writing aims to support a position by providing claims in support of the position and evidence in support of the claims. Numerous points of evidence are often used to support a claim, and numerous claims are connected to support a position. Evidence is generally grounded with source material. Claims can be determined and then evidence can be found to support them, but collecting and curating information and then identifying patterns and determining clusters of evidence that support a category that can be defined as a claim is the approach we will advocate in practice. Narrow questions may have a specific answer that only needs limited claims and some supporting evidence. More complicated questions result in complex positions that require a variety of claims to allow the audience to view the question from multiple perspectives. Incorporating a variety of claims allows for the inclusion of different appeals, such as ethos, pathos, and logos. That could work for different members of the audience. Complex questions also call for different claims from different perspectives: financial, ethical, practical, aesthetic, so that an audience member who doesn't respond to or agree with one claim might be influenced by a different approach or appeal. When the goal is to provide evidence that convinces an audience of a position, the definition of convincing cannot be divorced from the audience. If you want to convince the Supreme Court, the evidence for your claims has to be supported not only by concrete precedent and sound reasoning, but also by theoretical and conceptual arguments of ethics, not to mention the intellectual agility to respond to complex questions on the spot. If you want to convince your friend to see a movie, You probably just need to say it looks good, or it's playing at the right time, or perhaps that you will pay. While the burden of proof varies depending on the audience and stakes, there is also a difference between convincing an audience of your conclusion and convincing an audience to act upon your conclusion. Convincing someone that buying a Subaru is a good idea is far from different than convincing someone to buy a Subaru. In general, strong evidence supports a claim with strong source content and context. Looking at a standard basic model can help. You have the position, then you would have your first claim, and within the first claim, you would provide potentially 3 pieces of evidence. Then, to further support your position, you would have a second claim with potentially 3 pieces of evidence as well. And this could vary higher or lower than 3 pieces. You would also potentially have a third claim with more evidence to support it. And that can keep going on until the position is well defined and well defended. In addition to understanding that evidence supports claims and claims serve as evidence to support positions that answer big questions in broad debates, the final element that is important for comprehending and constructing arguments is the connection between the evidence and the claims, and between the claims and the position, which we will call the reasoning. A strong connection is a connection in which the evidence is translated into the appropriate claim, and the claims are connected together with solid reasoning and translated into a position that is accurately articulated and justified by all the claims in their evidence. All the individual pieces need to be solid and the connections need to be secure in order for the overall case being presented in support of the position not to be compromised. Before we dive into reasoning, we will focus on identifying claims and evidence in support of a position. But knowing that reasoning is the connecting glue can be helpful when you start practicing disconnecting. In simplest terms, an academic argument is made for an academic audience, which would be any argument assigned in any of your classes. Some academic arguments might require academic sources, and some might require you to argue to an audience beyond the academy, which is the case for our group project. In addition to constructing an argument for academic audiences, much of what you read in university-level content will include claims supported by evidence, and you will be expected to identify, evaluate, and respond to the pieces of the argument. Locating an argument. The best way to learn to identify the elements of an argument is by identifying elements within an argument. And the best place to start identifying these elements is as a group and with a shared source. Initially, our goal is to identify the evidence and the claims in support of a position. Our goal is to not evaluate any element of the argument, which requires a deeper contextual analysis of the evidence, claims, and reasoning, but to locate the claims and the evidence and to discuss the reasoning and start asking questions. We already do this to some degree when we engage arguments all around us. So while we may not always know the names of the associated concepts and theories we are using, we can identify positions in the claims and evidence that support the position, and we can discuss them within our groups. For assignment 3.1, we will practice identifying positions, claims, and evidence. Doling Conclusions on State Disinvestment discusses 2 texts that provide different perspectives on a current debate within higher education. The 2 positions, which could be referred to as perspectives, arguments, or conclusions, are easy to identify because each is stated and supported in the original text discussed in Doling Conclusions on State Disinvestment. Make a copy of Doling Conclusions on State Disinvestment. Read the article with the goal of comprehension and highlight the following: the thesis or main idea of the article, the 2 main sides and their main claim, the evidence to support the main claim of each. As you read, highlight the 2 positions and comment on the claims and evidence in support of each. Then use your highlights and comments, your annotated text, to outline the 2 positions of the claims and evidence for both. Outline. Here's an example of outlining 2 different claims. You have the position identified, and then you identify 3 different claims or more, potentially less, within the source. And within each of those claims, you look for major points of evidence to support them. If you identify more than 3 claims offered on either side, include all the claims you locate. Also include all the evidence offered in support of each claim. Identifying claims and evidence is not always easy because evidence can seem like new claims, and new claims can build on existing claims in ways that make the new claim seem like evidence from the prior claim. After annotating and outlining the article, consider the following. What is one position and what are the main claims and evidence? What is the other position and what are the main claims and evidence? What is the thesis of Doling conclusions on state disinvestment? Does the article endorse one perspective over the other? How would you summarize the article in one paragraph? How would you summarize the article in one sentence? How do the positions relate to your position on the topic of state funding for USF? How could you counter both positions? Assignment 3.1 builds upon these considerations. Often the goal of critical thinking isn't to find an answer, but to dissect and contextualize a situation in order to better understand and identify the right questions to ask in search of ideas and other questions without easy answers. Before diving right into the assignment, let yourself think about the positions, claims, and evidence discussed in the sample article, and start to make connections to your group presentation and the larger conversation around the topic. Then provide thoughtful responses that can inform Assignment 3.1, your group presentation, and your position paper, but that can also help you practice identifying arguments that surround you every day and prepare you to deconstruct them by looking at their structure and support. Assignment 3.1. Make a copy of Doling Conclusions on State Disinvestment, annotate the article, and outline the article at the bottom of your annotated copy. Attach a link to your annotated and outlined copy of the article and respond to the following. Also, make sure the link that you attach is able to be viewed by your instructor. You will need to change the permissions within the document in order to do that. Number 1. Outline the article, including the two positions and the claims and evidence for both. Number 2. For one position, write one sentence stating the main claim. Include a signal phrase, direct quote, and an in-text citation. And for one sentence explaining the evidence used to support the main claim. Format direct source material if you use it, and don't forget to note the source of the information. Number 3. For the other position, write one sentence stating the main claim. Include a direct quote and a signal phrase, and one sentence explaining the evidence used to support the main claim. Format direct source material if you use it, and don't forget to note the source of the information. Number 4. Write a one-paragraph summary of the article. Note what the sides agree and disagree on, and discuss why the findings are different. Number 5. Write a one-sentence summary of the article. Include a signal phrase. Number 6. What is the thesis of Doling Conclusions on State Disinvestment? Does the article endorse one perspective over the other? Number 7. Write one sentence explaining how one of the positions and its claims and evidence can be used to support your position in relation to funding for USF. And number 8. Write one sentence stating and refuting the other position in relation to your position.